Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and welcome to Patron Week, where I take votes to see what I cover. If you want to be part of the next vote, make sure to check out my Patreon for more details, because if you join at the Nebula Navigator tier or higher before the end of the month, you can choose from Weather Painters, Thunder Dragon, Lunalights, and Dangers. Today, I'll be covering this month's winner, Crystrons. Premiering in the November 2016 core set Invasion Vengeance, this theme was a callback to some of the game's most outlandish synchro summons. The Excel Synchro that required a tuner synchro and a non-tuner synchro monster as material, and the dreaded double tuning, which required 2 or more non-tuners and 1 non-tuner as material. In an attempt to reach such lofty heights, Crystrons were pushed as far as they could go, making them one of the premier monster types for synchro summoning, and letting them use material from a variety of places. You could even perform those synchro summons at quick effect speed, bringing them out during your opponent's turn to trigger effects when they least expected it. However, despite their radical design, combined with some truly unfortunate restrictions, this deck never truly got off the ground, becoming so underplayed that it paradoxically produced one of the most feared monsters in the game. But we'll go over that later on. For now, let's do some inventory on all our parts, figure out how to piece together this Crystal Chronicle, then see what aftermarket modifications we can use to cruise down the finish line in style. It's time to clear your mind with Crystrons. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and what better way to travel down that road than on your Duel Runner? We'll be covering iconic 5Ds characters along the way, and our next stop is 20K, where we'll start the You Say Explained series, covering Stardust, Junk, and whatever other cards can help us rev it up! We've also got our Discord, where you can find such rousing topics as cold food discourse, and a Twitter, where you can stay up to date on channel news and my bad takes. And if you really like what I do here, please consider joining my YouTube membership. It's basically like a Twitch sub, emotes included, or backing me on Patreon so you can get your name in the credits, as well as help determine future explained videos that I make. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with Crystrons? Well, they're a series of water attribute machine type monsters from the Drago Slayer storyline, specifically during the battle against the True Kings. They have an affinity for synchro summons, and the tuners and non-tuners handle this in different ways, so let's start with those tuners. In fact, we can talk about all 3 of them rather succinctly, as they all have the same effect with minor, though important, differences. During your opponent's main or battle phase, they can special summon a non-tuner monster from a particular place, but its effects are negated, and if you do, immediately after that effect resolves, you synchro summon a machine type synchro monster, using only that monster and that tuner as material. The level 1 Quan summons from the hand, the level 2 Citri summons from the grave, and the level 3 Rion summons one of your banished monsters. The machine limitation does put a bit of a damper on this effect. Of the 56 machine synchros in the game, only 34 of them have a tuner requirement that doesn't rule out Crystrons, and only 25 have generic non-tuner requirements. Though thankfully our on-theme synchros that matter don't have to worry about those restrictions. This unfortunately means we can't drop a Black Rose Dragon on our opponent's turn with this effect, but that doesn't have to be all bad, because 2 legal targets, Excel and Formula Synchron, can also synchro summon during our opponent's main phase, so if you have the material on board, you can perform another synchro summon, this time without having to worry about summon restrictions. It's a lot of complex stuff, having to make sure the right material is in the right place at the right time to perform the right synchro summon, but hopefully by the end of this video, that'll all be crystal clear. Alright, now it's time for our non-tuners, and all of our level 4 and lower ones also share an effect. They can target a face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon a Crystron tuner from your deck. But you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except machine-type synchro monsters. This can help you assemble your synchros, but once again puts you under that machine synchro-only lock. They also all have an effect that can be activated in the grave by banishing themselves, but if you use one effect, you can't use the other that turn. So you can't have a non-tuner pop itself to summon a tuner, and then banish it out of the grave for another effect. Crystron Praseortal is a level 2 monster with 500 attack and 2000 defense, and can be banished from your grave to special summon a Crystron monster from your hand. Not only is this good to set up cards for our non-tuners to destroy for their tuner summoning effect, it's also pretty handy for assembling the cards you need for a synchro summon, whether you need a tuner or a non-tuner, depending on what your hand currently looks like. Though I feel the need to reiterate that you can't normal summon Praseortal, pop itself to summon a tuner out of your deck, then banish themselves right out of the grave for a non-tuner out of your your hand to complete the process on that same turn, because why would they make it easy to Synchro summon in the Synchro archetype? It's pretty helpful when you're in a jam, and also has big Emerald Tortoise energy, so if you ever tire of using Crystrons, you can just pretend you're playing Crystal Beasts. Crystron Smyger is a level 3 monster with 1000 attack and 1800 defense, and can be banished from your grave to add a Crystron spell or trap from your deck to your hand. Now, having a spell and trap searcher is usually a pretty good thing, but in Crystron's case, yeah, not only do we have a very small pool to pick from, they aren't what I'd call the best. Heck, it's also in the same hall of interesting card type inclusions as Nekroz of Clausulus, because while Smyger says you can search a spell, a quick search of a Yu-Gi-Oh database will show that there is no Crystron spell, because the Draco Slayer line of archetypes had the bright idea of giving them each a field spell that supported the archetype but wasn't name-stamped as such. Like, do you plan on releasing the Crystron spell anytime soon, Konami? Because I'm not gonna take this fee lying down. Crystron Thistvern is a level 3 monster with 1500 attack and defense, and you can banish them from your grave to add any Crystron monster from your deck to your hand. This one's our best searcher, as it can grab whichever situational effect works best at the time. Whether we need a token, summon a Crystron out of your hand, or put a Crystron into your hand to make that effect live. We do have a whole archetype of crystal monsters, but out of all of them, Thistvern certainly is a real gem. Crystron Rosenix is a level 4 monster with 1800 attack and 1000 defense, and can be banished from the grave to special summon a Crystron token, which is a level 1 water machine monster with 0 attack and defense that can't be tributed. Now, in our theme, this can be used to help bridge the gap when it comes to synchro summoning, giving us that extra level we need to get the numbers in line, or to just add another non-tuner to the mix for any that require 2 or more non-tuners. But in other themes, because this was made before Vrains, it's used as an easy link extender because that second effect doesn't lock you out of any of your plays. By summoning Scrap Recycler, commonly played in Orchest as a way to dump other machines into the grave, you can send Rosenix to the grave and immediately make a token, at which point you can link it off into a Link Spider if you need to turn it into an effect monster, or Link Haribo if your deck has a lot of level 1 synergies. Either way, you can go into Link 2 plays without using any other cards, and without placing any restrictions on you. This means, with a little bit of creativity, anyone can be a Duelist of the Rosenix. Next is our last main deck monster, and they play by a few different rules. Crystron Solfefnir is a level 5 monster with 2000 attack and 1500 defense, and if they're in your hand or grave, you can discard a Crystron card, except another copy of Solfefnir, to special summon them, then destroy a card you control. This is actually pretty neat, because while our trap card's activated effects are kinda lame, their grave effects are top-notch. And while destroying your own card is kind of a hassle, especially if you don't have any other card, so you'd have to destroy Solfefnir, there's still things you can do with it. Because if destroyed by battle or card effect, even your own, you can special summon a Crystron monster from your deck in defense position, so it can be a big monster to help with your synchro summons, or as an enabler for the rest of your theme's effects, pulling your monsters out of your deck and throwing cards in the grave, with every activation getting you Solfefnirer to victory. Alright, now it's time for our synchros. Crystron Quandax is a level 4 synchro tuner monster with 1800 attack and 2000 defense, requiring generic material. Once per turn during your opponent's main or battle phase, you can, immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon a synchro monster using materials including this card you control. Also, if this synchro summoned card is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can target a Crystron monster in your grave except a synchro monster and special summon it. So, on top of Formula and Excel Synchron, we've got another tuner synchro we can use to wreak havoc on our opponent's turn. And if our opponent tries to blow it up before you can make good use of it, you can just replace it with another Crystron to help with our combos later. Which is such a nice effect, you might forget that Quan basically crawled inside of Smyger and made them their mech suit. Crystron Amatrix is a level 5 synchro monster with 2500 attack and 1500 defense, requiring generic material. If synchro summoned, you can change all face-up special summoned monsters your opponent controls to defense position. And much like Quandax, if destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target a non-synchro Crystron monster in your grave and special summon it. The effect seems pretty lackluster when used on your turn, but can actually mean the difference between winning and losing when used on your opponent's turn, as you can blank a lot of attacks by quick synchroing into Amatrix during your opponent's battle phase. Sure, Link monsters aren't going to care one way or the other, but in any other case, they're a pretty spicy combat Amatrix. Now it's time for our bosses, and the first up to bat is Crystron Phoenix. They're a level 9 Synchro monster with 2800 attack and 2000 defense, requiring a Tuner Synchro monster and one or more non-Tuner Synchro monsters as material. If Synchro summoned, you can banish all spell and trap cards your opponent controls and is in their grave, so if they're planning on using them for anything, they're gonna have to act fast. And if this Synchro summoned card is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can target any other monster in your grave and special summon it, regardless if it's a Synchro or not. Heck, it's regardless if it's a Crystron or not. Now, unfortunately, this otherwise isn't going to impact the board much. As it turns out, removing back row isn't exactly a winning strategy, and they're competing in the same space as something like Stardust Warrior, which can negate special summons and replaces themselves with a new Synchro monster right out of the extra as a Synchro summon. Like, sure, Altergeist are gonna feel the burn, but that phrase doesn't even make sense here because this is a water theme. Our last Synchro is Crystron Gandrix, a level 9 Synchro monster with 3000 attack and defense, and they're the double tuning to Phoenix's Excel Synchro, requiring 2 or more tuners and 1 non-tuner monster as material. If Synchro summoned, you can target monsters your opponent controls and or in their grave, up to the number of Synchro material used for this card's Synchro summon, and banish them. And if the Synchro summoned card is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can target a banished monster except this copy of Gandrix, and special summon it to your field. Now that's some removal, especially if done during your opponent's turn. While it doesn't require a Synchro tuner, their quick Synchro effects do help in using Gandrix as a way to throw a wrench in your opponent's plans, stripping them of on-field monsters integral to building their board, or getting recursive or otherwise useful monsters out of their grave. And then, if your opponent destroys Gandrix, you can take one of those monsters you banished as your own. Or if you've got any of your own banished monsters you'd like to play again, you can revive those as well. Either way, you benefit from Gandrix's destruction, which means if your opponent has the opportunity to do so, they'll be in for a bit of a Crystron quandary. But here's the big one. The one that's overshadowed every Crystron card, arguably every Synchro-related card ever printed, as any deck that uses the mechanic has to imagine how this card plays into their strategy. It's been part of game-breaking combos, and has avoided being relegated to the ban list by throwing countless other tuners away to replace it. I am, of course, referring to the one, the only, Crystron Halqifibrax. It's so controversial, in fact, that even invoking its name causes ripples to echo across the player base, as many prefer the name it went by before an official translation, Crystron Needlefiber. It's a Link 2 monster with 1500 attack, requiring any 2 monsters, including at least 1 tuner. If Link summoned, you can special summon a level 3 or lower tuner from your hand or deck in defense position, but it can't activate its effects this turn, which isn't a hindrance to our tuners because they only activate during our opponent's turn. And during your opponent's main or battle phase, as a quick effect, you can banish this card you control to special summon a tuner Synchro monster from your extra deck, which counts as a Synchro summon. Everything about this card is a total blowout, with no restrictions in place for what you can do after it's summoned. You can use the tuner you summoned to make a Link 3, and while they were all legal, people would play the tuners with the best possible grave effects, replacing themselves so you can climb the Link and Synchro ladder even more. And that's why you can't play cards like Mecha Phantom Beast Online and Jet Synchron anymore. You can't even make Jet Warrior anymore without resorting to monsters that count as Jet Synchron like Junk Anchor and Righty Driver. And none of that gets into what shenanigans you can do with its other effect. You can summon Shooting Riser Dragon, bidding a card to use on your next turn while setting up for another quick Synchro, since it's a tuner with a modular level, fitting basically any playing field. Formula Synchron can draw you a card while setting up for that Synchro summon, and Desert Locust can rip a card out of your opponent's hand while also setting up a quick Synchro. And normally, I'd also be mad at another monster meant for one archetype that's been exploited by the metagame at large, but in this scenario, I actually don't have much ground to stand on. Because of the restriction we can all too easily find ourselves under thanks to our non-tuners, we wouldn't even be able to make Halqifibrax. Unless we assemble the necessary materials with Solfefnir and a well-timed Prasiordal, you won't be able to thread the needle on this play sequence. Okay, now it's time for our spells and traps. First up is our field spell, which once again isn't name-stamped, Crystallic Potential. It gives all your Crystrons a 300 attack and defense boost, and once per turn during the end phase, you can draw cards equal to the number of Crystron Synchro monsters you Synchro summoned this turn. That makes it something of a delayed Hyper Librarian, another stellar card in the theme, were it not for our machine focus. Though thankfully, you can play potential after doing a swath of synchro summons and still get the benefit. It even triggers during both players' end phases, so you can do your quick synchro shenanigans and still get the benefit. But only when it comes to those Crystron synchros. And when it comes to synchros in general, you simply can't wait until the end phase to get the card draw. Hyper Librarian is so good because it gives you the draw immediately, helping you to extend your plays while they happen so you can raise your ceiling. Potential, by contrast, doesn't really raise your ceiling so much as give you the ability to do it again next turn, if it isn't removed from the field by your opponent. It has some really nice upside, but because of card text that's focused too much on preventing another synchro spam strategy, it just doesn't live up to its full potential. Crystron Entry is a normal trap that special summons 2 Crystron tuners, one from your hand and one from your grave. Also, during either player's turn, except the turn Entry was sent to the grave, you can banish it from your grave, then target a Crystron monster you control, and send another Crystron from your deck to the grave, whose level is different from the targeted monster. And if you do, that targeted monster's level becomes that of the monster sent to the grave. In a more flexible situation, I'd call Entry's first effect good. After all, getting 2 tuners that can quick synchro is a great way to get Phoenix online. But because they have to come from 2 very restrictive pools, it's gonna take a lot of work to line the levels up in a way that makes it work. The grave effect is a bit more my speed. Not only does it provide good modulation, you can set up your non-tuner grave effects, though it is a huge pain that you can't use it on the turn it hits the grave. But hey, I guess that's just the price of Entry. Crystron Impact is another normal trap that targets one of your banished Crystrons and special summons it, and if you do, if your opponent controls any face-up monsters, change their defense to 0 permanently, which I guess is supposed to combo with Amatrix's Mass Stop Attack effect. And during either player's turn, except the turn Impact is sent to the grave, when a card or effect is activated that targets a Crystron monster you control, you can banish Impact from your grave to negate that effect. So, hey, at least we have some kind of targeting protection to keep our plays safe. And summoning a banished Crystron isn't bad per se, as it recycles a card that can get us back into the synchro game, but if I'm being honest, I don't think it does enough to really have an impact. Okay, so that's all the Crystron cards, but what do we do with them? Well, that's a pretty tough question because we don't really have a strong win condition. Sure, Quarian Gandrix is some powerful removal, but doesn't really have a plan to close out the game as a follow-up. We're gonna need to lean very heavily into other strategies for some cards we can use to get us over the finish line. But what can we play to help them out? Crystallic Potential is a pretty big letdown, but as long as we've got an unsearchable field spell, we might want to branch out into something like Starlight Junction. Its first effect is pretty helpful if we plan to run a bit of a Synchron package, which might be nice considering Quick Draw is a pretty good discard outlet, but its main usage is as removal. Even just using our main deck tuner's effects can trigger it, and that means we don't even have to summon anything super impactful to spin one of our opponent's cards back into the deck. In fact, Yusei's kind of a treasure trove when it comes to cards that work with Crystron. For instance, if you can get Crystron Phoenix online, Scrap Iron Signal is just a repeatable Divine Wrath at no cost. If you have Quandax, Amatrix, and a Crystron token, you can quick synchro that token and a Quandax into Excel Synchron before using it and Amatrix to make Satellite Warrior. That's at least 3 synchros in grave, giving you a swift 3-card pop on top of a 5500 attack Bruiser. Lean more into the Yusei theming, and it even floats into a bunch of your other synchros when your opponent gets it off the field. Even Junk Converter can get our combos going. Ditch it and any Crystron tuner into Junk Synchron, normal summon them to get back the Converter, then make Excel Synchron. At that point, Converter can summon back Junk Synchron, and now you have 8 levels worth of tuners. Depending on what non-tuners you have on board, you can send another Synchron from your deck to the grave to modulate Excel, then you can quick synchro into Quarian Gandrix at any time for removal, or summon Tyrant Red Dragon Archfiend to wipe the board. As for a silly tech pick, well, I can't think of a deck that's in more need of a win condition that can be constructed in the most convoluted of ways than Red Supernova Dragon. Ideally, we'll have the ability to have Quandax and Amatrix on board, which is already 9 levels, a non-tuner synchro, and a tuner. If we can also put on board Quan and Citri, 2 more tuners that have a total of 3 levels between them, maybe using something like Crystron Entry, and we've got all the material we need. When you're ready, just pull the trigger, and you'll have what will be, at minimum, a 5500 attack body that can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. And the second your opponent activates a monster effect, you can banish every card your opponent controls. And the best part is, while it must first be synchro summoned, it can be revived once it's done so, meaning if you later get your Phoenix destroyed, the fire that comes back is going to be a little hotter than your opponent expected. And that's all I've got to say about Crystrons. They're a very gimmicky deck that lacks the cards needed to make a splash in the metagame, being even unable to effectively use a card of its own theme that warped the metagame around it. However, if you miss the old days of synchro summoning, when the sky felt like the limit in regards to combos, this deck is an easy way to get a quick fix, as long as you and the deck are in sync. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Do you agree that Crystron are going to need a major overhaul before it makes its way past table 500, or do you believe I haven't fully comprehended this deck's many facets? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video around. It really does a lot to help me out. And if you want to help fund my quest to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, I'd be so grateful if you could check out my YouTube membership and Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. In fact, I'd like to take this time to thank my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, CozyBoat275, Nebula Navigators, Benjamin Meisner, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba331, Jared C., Maven, Panther J., Shooting Star 3300, The Wizard Moose and the Fresh Prince of Con-Air, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Colin Todd and the Legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. And if you want to see another video about Synchro Savants, check out this video I did covering Sword Souls. And if you want to see two Yugi tubers going at it, check out this playlist of mine and NoahJenk's new series, Progression Polls. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.